In 1817, the Linnaean Society of New England produced a startling report. Investigating sightings of some sort of new sea creature, they thoroughly examined the evidence, including a juvenile of the creature that had been captured in the area of Cape Ann, Massachusetts. And they made the rather extraordinary claim that they had identified not just a new species, but an entire new genus, which they called Scoliophis atlanticus. Scoliophis combining the Latin words for crooked and twisted with snake, and giving the creature its common name, the Atlantic humped snake. Even more startling, they claimed that the creature they had was merely a baby from a much larger creature that had been seen in the Cape Ann area earlier in the year. They claimed to have identified and scientifically described a sea monster, very like creatures from ancient legend. It is history that deserves to be remembered.
Sea monsters, often but not exclusively in the form of serpents, are a common mythical motif in many cultures. The sea god Yam in Ugaritic cosmology is usually depicted as a serpent. The word tannin in Ugarit culture, a snake creature, is used in the Hebrew Bible, not identifying a specific creature, but referring to sea monsters like Leviathan and Rahab. The Trojan priest who argued against bringing the Trojan horse inside the city was killed by sea serpents sent by the gods. Perseus is said to have rescued the princess Andromeda from a rampaging, perhaps more whale-like sea monster. Sea serpents like Jormungandr, the world serpent, also appear in Scandinavian mythology. South Asian cultures have the Naga, snake or part snake beings associated with the water, and the Japanese have the dragon god Ryujin, often depicted as serpent-like. In more natural history, numerous creatures were supposedly sighted in antiquity. Pliny writes that the bones of the creature that threatened Andromeda were displayed in Rome, exceeding 40 feet in length, and the ribs were higher than those of the Indian elephant. In his Historia Animalium, Aristotle writes that there are also sea serpents, in shape greatly resembling their relatives on land. He also wrote that serpents in Libya are very large, claiming they ate oxen and even threw themselves upon triremes and capsized them. Pliny says it is well-known fact that a Roman army during the Punic War captured a serpent 120 feet long. The Greek writer Strabo reports a fallen dragon on the Levant coast, the corpse of which was about a plethysrum, or 30 meters to 100 feet, in length, and so bulky that horsemen standing by it on either side could not see one another. There are also, of course, actual sea snakes, which spend most of their lives in marine environments but only live in tropical waters, and water snakes, a term used for many snakes that live semi-aquatic lives. The medieval period is famous for countless depictions of sea monsters on maps, and tales of dragons and other monsters abound. In the 16th century, Swedish writer Olaus Magnus wrote that all who sail along Norway's coast tell of a serpent of fearsome size, from 200 to 400 feet long and 20 feet wide, which resides in rifts and caves outside Bergen. It is said to have flaming red eyes and to attack vessels, lifting itself up like a column from the water. The more scientific-minded Europe following the beginning of the Enlightenment in the 17th century might have doubted the most astounding tales, but scientists also sought to dispel the myth by discovering and describing the reality. Descriptions of a sea serpent on the Massachusetts coast near Cape Ann date at least to 1638. The area today called Cape Ann, which marks the northern boundary of the Bay of Massachusetts, was first explored by Europeans in 1605 and 06 by Samuel de Champlain. The town of Gloucester was first settled in 1623 and incorporated as a town in the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1642, making it one of the oldest European towns in the modern state. Gloucester became an important center for fishing, among other maritime trades. In 1638, Englishman John Jocelyn first visited New England and claims that Native Americans he saw while he was there told me of a sea serpent, a snake, that lay coiled up like a cable upon the rock at Cape Ann. A boat passing by with English on board and 2 Indians would have shot the serpent, but the Indians dissuaded them, saying if he were not killed outright, they would all be in danger of their lives. Another less certain report comes from the journal of Obadiah Turner, who in September 1641 wrote that after a storm, a most wonderful serpent was seen a short way off from shore, as big round in ye thickest part as a wine pip, 15 fathoms or more in length. He wrote that the people at Cape Ann knew a creature like it, which come out of the sea and coil himself upon ye land. More tales of serpents in the region were reported. The Protector, an American ship that sailed during the Revolution, came across a serpent in May 1780, shortly before it was captured by the British. George Little, first lieutenant of the ship, describes a large serpent, which he judged to be 45 to 50 feet long and 15 inches in diameter. It swam with its head several feet above the water. A small boat gave chase and attempted to kill the beast. Little only made the report in a letter written in 1804, but included a note that one Joseph Kent had sighted a monster of the above description in 1751. Two others also reported sighting a serpent while on board the Protector. Commodore Edward Preble, then a midshipman, made a similar report, recorded in a biography written by James Fenimore Cooper. A serpent was seen motionless on the water, and Preble was ordered to take a large boat to kill the creature. They fired upon it with a swivel gun, to no effect, and lost the serpent in the water. George Little's brother Luther told much the same story, though they have some differences. All three reports seem to be recording the same, or at least a very similar incident. In 1793, the Salem Gazette published a report from Captain Crabtree. He reported that on the 20th of June last, having just made Mount Desert Island, distant nearly 10 leagues, I suddenly got sight of a serpent of an enormous size swimming on the surface of the ocean, its head elevated about 6 or 8 feet out of water. He judged the body to be about the size of a barrel in circumference, but the head larger, having some resemblance of a horse's. He judged the creature to be at least 55 some feet in length. It was dark brown in color with a perfectly black eye. He claimed that he was inside of the creature for near an hour, and that he and his whole crew observed it with the minutest attention. He also wrote that it had no fins, but seemed to swim by writhing the body like other serpents. He concluded with a description of a second sighting of two of them seen on the shore of Cranberry Islands, which fled as soon as they were seen. These are the first seen in our seas, he wrote, though they may have been seen on the coast of Norway. In 1793, sightings were not near Cape Ann, but about 200 miles up the coast in modern Maine. 24 years later, sightings of a remarkably similar creature would stir up considerable interest. In August of 1817, reports of a huge serpent broke into local papers. An August 16th report in the Essex Register described an unusual fish or serpent discovered by the fishermen in Gloucester Harbor. All attempts to take the fish have been ineffectual. A man wrote in that our small craft are fearful of venturing out on fishing. Others claimed that they'd seen at least two of the creatures. Descriptions told of a long creature with a series of humps on the water, like the wooden buoys on a net rope, like a string of gallon kegs 100 feet long. The Daily National Intelligencer of Washington, D.C. published a report from August 17th which claimed that the first sighting was actually 10 days earlier, around August 7th. But nobody gave credit to the story. Soon, however, sightings became general. It was seen from the shore, playing in the water, moving at extreme speeds. The Intelligencer also reports that the head appears mixed with black and white, and to resemble that of a large dog. While size estimates varied, the Intelligencer said that those who approached it most closely say it was 60 to 70 feet long, and a barrel in thickness. It was also extremely fast, starting forward at the rate of a mile in 3 minutes, and leaving a wake behind half a mile in length. Further reports of serpents along the coast soon abounded. For newspaper editors, the story made good copy. On August 22nd, a broadside was printed with the heading, "A monstrous sea serpent, the largest ever seen in America, has just made its appearance in Gloucester Harbor, Cape Ann, and has been seen by hundreds of respectable citizens." The existence of the creature suddenly seemed undeniable. The 1817 sightings brought to light numerous earlier reports that had been generally dismissed. A letter was reprinted that a Captain Lillis had seen a snake of some 40 feet long, holding its head erect above the water around 1787. Reverend Abraham Cummings claimed to have sighted a fish about 70 feet long in 1802. Cummings' report was taken seriously as he was Harvard educated, but he is known, however, for also publishing a report claiming to have seen with many others a ghost in Sullivan, Maine. According to Cummins, the creature appeared to undulate up and down, not side to side, to swim, giving it a humped appearance. Another writer described the movement as appearing like flexuous hillocks. And Elkanah Finney reported to the Linnaean Society that he watched a creature in 1815 of similar description, writing that it looked like a string of buoys. He guessed that the one he sighted was 100 or 120 feet long. The Linnaean Society of New England soon took notice of the reports. They met soon after hearing of the serpent, and by August 19th had formed a committee of inquiry. They sent out letters to obtain sworn testimony and received numerous answers, such as the one sent by Mr. Finney. The creature was sighted repeatedly throughout August. On the 21st, the Boston Daily Advertiser reported that the serpent only appeared when the water is smooth and the weather warm. The same article remarked the bunches or humps were thought to be caused by the manner of motion, consisting of alternate rising and depression, like the motion of a caterpillar. Quite a few people aimed to either catch the creature with hooks or kill it with harpoon or musket, if they could manage it. The head was described as the size of a bucket, shaped like a dog, and by one as filled with shark teeth. An August 25th report from the Boston Patriot even claimed that the serpent had received herrings when offered him. The Boston Broadside mentioned a stinger about 4 feet in length. Another witness reported a 12-inch prong or spear. A bounty of $2,000 was offered if the creature could be captured, an enormous sum at the time. Others who sailed in the hopes of earning the bounty were disappointed. By August 30th, the serpent was reported to have left the harbor. Some papers took to calling the serpent his snake ship. The sightings caused a craze when writers said that he shall never forget the excitement produced by the reports that Salem witchcraft was no touch to it. According to the Linnaean Society report, about 4 weeks after they collected testimony, they received a serpent of remarkable appearance, which was exhibited as the progeny of the great serpent, captured by locals on Cape Ann. Much smaller than the great serpent, at under 3 feet, the snake was distinguished from all others by a row of protuberances along the back, apparently formed by undulations of the spine. After exhaustive description, at the end of their report, the Society declared that it was distinct from other genera of serpents in the flexuous structure of its spine, and named a new genus, Scoliophis atlanticus. In addition to the sworn reports of witnesses, the Society included an excerpt from Eric Pontoppidan's The Natural History of Norway, who described alleged Norwegian sea serpents with some similarities to the ones cited at Cape Ann. They supposedly surfaced in July and August, but only on calm seas, and were said to have folds similar to the humps of the Cape Ann serpent. The report was somewhat controversial. One European, while convinced the serpent was real, wrote that the reports were riddled with the imagination of some sailors. Another wrote that there was no good reason to connect the huge animal with the little specimen the Society had examined. A year later, the New England Palladium reported that a celebrated French naturalist had ascertained that the progeny is a common land snake. The skeptics and mockers had a field day, a later writer concluded. Indeed, the poor work by the Linnaean Society contributed to a lurking suspicion of American statements, as one European naturalist wrote. Later, authorities would declare the specimen the report described as a coluber constrictor, or common black snake, with a diseased spine. The identification of new genus was formally discarded by the Boston Society of Natural History in the 1860s. But others were firm believers. While a scientific description was absent, too many knowledgeable and trustworthy folk had reported that they had seen the creature. The same article in the Palladium included an editor's note that the existence of the great sea serpent was undeniable. An 1818 report in the Memorandum of the American Academy of Arts Society claimed that the imagination seems to have had no influence, and the existence of the animal is indisputable. In London, the Journal of Science and Arts said that the existence of the serpent was placed beyond doubt. In the 1833 edition of Introduction to Geology, geologist Robert Bakewell paused to discuss a topic that was then controversial. Could animals become extinct? He thought no, that any specimens of creatures that were found only as fossil forms would be discovered in some other part of the world. I am inclined to believe, he wrote, that the ichthyosaurus, or some species of similar genus, is still existing in the present seas. He then specifically brought up the great sea serpent cited in 1817 as evidence. It was not the last sighting of the strange creature. The Linnaean report included a postscript of a sighting in Long Island Sound on October 15th. Reports from 1818 put a 190-foot creature near Norfolk, Virginia, and another off Long Island. A Captain Richard Rich claimed to have struck one with a harpoon, but later displayed what he claimed was the creature, a large tuna. In May, Captain Joseph Woodward of the schooner Adamant claimed that he shot a cannon at the creature, but it only shook its head and its tail in an extraordinary manner and advanced towards the ship with open jaws. In July, the Portland Argus reported that a snake 80 to 100 feet length had been seen in the harbor. A creature sighted in Casco Bay, Maine, around the same time, has its own cryptid following. We've dubbed the animal Cassie. In August of 1819, another sighting was reported in the Boston Daily Advertiser of a sea serpent at Nahant, from a letter from James Prince, marshal for the District of Massachusetts. This animal poked its head 3 feet out of the water, and the writer counted 13 bunches on his back. My family thought there were 15. Prince also compared its actions to many familiar shore animals, sharks, whales, and dolphins, saying that while he watched it, it behaved like none of these. Reports continued to come in into the 1820s, but tapered off. For a time, serpent tourism brought enough people to town that a hotel was even built near the shore. Some other significant sightings gave rise to public excitement, such as a report from HMS Daedalus of a huge serpent off the coast of North Africa. But despite ongoing sightings throughout the century and into the 20th, the creature soon became a figure of myth and folklore and not one of science. Anthony Cornelius Udemans, a zoologist who collected his sea serpent reports in his 1892 book, The Great Sea Serpent, bemoaned that the creature had become mythological. Many had, in fact, already thought the whole story ridiculous. In May of 1819, William Crafts put on his play The Sea Serpent, or Gloucester Hoax. In 1886, a creature again appeared at Cape Ann.
Today, most experts argue that it wasn't an unidentified animal at all, but rather a misidentification of some large marine animal. Skeptics have offered explanations with everything from whales to seals to large sea turtles to porpoises swimming all in a row. Joe Nickel wrote an article saying that the description that it had a stinger meant that it must have been the horn on a narwhal, even though narwhals aren't normally encountered outside of Arctic waters. Uderman thought it must be some sort of unidentified species of seal. A man named Robert France suggested that it was just a large marine mammal that had been caught up in some fishing debris. And of course, some people suggested that it might be a remnant of an ancient creature like a plesiosaur. But some people aren't convinced by any of those explanations because they note that it was witnessed by many people, including very experienced fishermen and learned scholars and famous people who saw it firsthand and said it was like nothing they'd ever seen before, but something entirely different. So whether it was some elaborate hoax or a case of misidentification or some manifestation of the millennia-old human fascination with what lies beneath the deep that prompted makers of ancient maps to put on the edge of the map, "Here be dragons," or whether it was some unidentified creature, perhaps today extinct. The witnesses of the Cape Ann Sea Monster deserve to be remembered. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.